What's up, Aridity Man? Back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla Explained. In today's video, we are going to be doing 38 things you missed in Godzilla -1's novelization first act. In this one, we are going to be going over all the juicy details there are about Odo Island, Godzilla's original form, and Godzilla's transformation into the king of the monsters. Let's jump into it. So before my channel and account and everything I've ever done online was so rudely hacked at the start of December, we were kind of on a roll covering the Godzilla -1 novelization and doing deep dives into the Godzilla Odo Island form. Not only did we do a couple videos going over what the scars on Godzilla's legs might be and how that might relate to a monster he could fight in an upcoming Godzilla -1 sequel, but we also did an extended deep dive into the Godzillasaurus, aka the Godzilla Odo Island version, at the start of Godzilla -1, and we tackled the question, would Shikishima have been able to kill Godzilla at the start of the movie if he opened fire? Unfortunately, that was all put on pause, as was apparently my entire life, by that freaking hacking situation, but we're over it now, or at least mostly, thankfully. And so today we're jumping back into the Godzilla -1 novelization. So for those of you who don't know, the Godzilla -1 novelization is, obviously it's a novelization version of the movie Godzilla -1, but what makes it so special is that it was written by the writer, director, and VFX supervisor of Godzilla -1, Takashi Yamazaki. This features an extended version of his story for Godzilla -1, and actually, as recently to my knowledge as November, Toho was promoting this as the official expanded version of Godzilla -1. Takashi Yamazaki, the director of -1, still promotes this as the expanded version of the story, which is why I think it's worth doing a real deep dive into this thing, and I'm really excited to do so with you guys. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting out, something that I did realize in the movie, but I guess I never connected the dots, is that Odo Island is covered in bombing holes at the start of the movie. But the bombing holes aren't just anywhere, they have destroyed the runway, essentially stranding the mechanics on the island. Shikishima's landing on Odo Island shows not only his skill as a pilot, but also his cunning. It's essentially an impossible task for Shikishima to take off once he's already landed. As long as he sticks to his story that his plane was malfunctioning, or at the very least that he thought the plane was malfunctioning, he could stay on Odo Island until the end of the war without any punishment or repercussion. The way Shikishima lands, he almost lands in a crater itself, almost crashing the plane, but the reason he does so is because the wheel essentially wobbles itself right into the mud and gets stuck, so the plane can't go anywhere. It is no longer mobile. It just shows how well thought out his plan really was. Shikishima lands at about the same time his squad is dying at sea, which is a really unfortunate and tragic and ironic thing, that Shikishima lands at about the time his suicide mission would have been wrapping up. Pretty brutal. Shikishima is also confirmed to be a lieutenant in the novelization, so he's not one of the higher ranking soldiers. The scene when the mechanic tells Shikishima that the world needs more people like him while he's sitting at the ocean watching the waves, Shikishima is so moved by this that he almost tears up at it, as it's one of the first bits of kindness he's been shown since the war started. Later that night, Tachibana actually invites Shikishima to a hot pot dinner where they all sit down and eat deep sea fish. They turn out to be the ones that Godzilla killed. As they eat the hot pot, some of the mechanics praise Shikishima's bravery and cleverness, dodging his suicide mission. It seems that everybody on the island is on the same page that that's what he did, and the only person who holds any sort of judgment about it is Tachibana, but as of now, Tachibana has no reason to be upset with Shikishima, so even he isn't holding it against him. According to the locals, on days when deep sea fishing picks up, that means Godzilla will return home. The fish essentially try to kill themselves, rushing to the surface to escape Godzilla, but in doing so they pressurize as a result. If they don't do that, then they try to dive as low as they can go to get away from Godzilla, and once again suffer the same fate. This is how deep sea fish keep winding up on Odo Island. It's also important to note that during this scene, the mechanic who's telling this story is not using the name Godzilla. He's not using the name Gojira. He's using a different form of that name that's something more like Koshira. Kind of like in Godzilla Singular Point, how the ancient form of the word Godzilla was Koshira. There's a tiny discrepancy between between the film and the novelization here, as the alarms sound and Shikishima leaves from the hut to find out what's going on rather than walking up to it like he does in the movie. Godzilla comes on land and is confirmed to be a completely naturally occurring creature in the -1 universe. Not only that, but Godzilla is confirmed to be 15 meters according to the novelization, standing at about 16.4 feet tall when he comes on land. Now, I don't know if he could stand up and straighten his back and be considered even taller than that. I don't know what the measurement is. I think it's from probably foot to head. I don't think it's counting the dorsal spines, and I don't think it's accounting for Godzilla being able to lean and stand up even higher. But Godzilla stands at 15 meters when he comes on land. Also, and I double-checked this, I triple-checked this because it didn't make a ton of sense to me, Godzilla eats several drums of gasoline before stomping on the remaining barrels and causing them to explode. It turns out the reason they explode in such a violent manner is because when Godzilla knocked down the guard tower, one of the searchlights wasn't completely destroyed. It winds up having a spark that contacts the gasoline at the same time Godzilla stomps the ground, causing the major explosion. One thing I found very interesting is that while Godzilla's lumbering around the Odo Island outpost, it's stated that the reason he's doing so is because he's examining the outpost itself and watching the flames as they spread rather than searching for the soldiers. Godzilla is a very territorial creature, but there is still no reason to believe Godzilla would do anything to the soldiers unless they provoked him into an attack. The only reason Godzilla attacks the first soldier in the first place on the guard tower is because they shine the searchlight at him, forcing him into an attack. Shikishima seems absolutely certain that the 20mm gun will kill Godzilla. The reason he doesn't pull the trigger is because he believes Godzilla should be left alone by humans. He thinks Godzilla should be allowed to return to sea. He also views this as another suicide mission, as he thinks opening fire on Godzilla wouldn't work fast enough to stop Godzilla before Godzilla killed Shikishima. Tachibana is also positive that the guns will kill Godzilla. However, writer and director Takashi Yamazaki confirms Godzilla would have survived the assault had Shikishima opened fire on him on Odo Island, meaning Shikishima does make the right call. Godzilla does knowingly spare Tachibana and Shikishima from his wrath, as he recognizes those are the only two people that don't attack him. The next morning, the bodies of Godzilla's victims are given a lot more gruesome details, including how some of them are so mangled and stomped that you can't tell front from back. Not all of them are covered in this either. Tachibana initially doesn't recognize Shikishima when he walks up, giving us a slightly extended scene. Caught up in his agony, he sees someone standing before him, and before he realizes it's Shikishima, he asks if that person has seen the lower half to a body he's looking for. He found the torso that morning, but can't find the legs. Before the person answers, he realizes it's Shikishima, and it leads directly into the scene from the movie, with Tachibana yelling at Shikishima and eventually knocking him to the ground. One thing I found incredibly important and wildly interesting is that Japan surrenders unconditionally just days after this event, meaning that at the very least, Hiroshima had already been hit with an atomic bomb, and very likely Nagasaki had been hit as well at the time Shikishima's suicide attack was scheduled. If you don't know, Hiroshima was bombed on August 6th, 1945, with Nagasaki following on August 9th. A few days later, on August 14th, 1945, it was officially announced that Japan was surrendering unconditionally. That doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room there, between August 9th and 14th. I think it's safe to say both cities had been hit, which makes Shikishima's decision all the more understandable. This was also something that I found incredibly interesting, but Shikishima and Tachibana are not rescued right away. It takes 6 months for them to be discovered on Odo Island and picked up. They lived together for 6 months on the island, with Shikishima staying out of sight and sleeping outdoors in order to stay away from Tachibana the entire time. For some reason, through their entire 6-month stay, neither one of them visits the original Odo Island village. At the very least, neither one of them stays at the Odo Island village. We don't know why. Upon returning home, it's common knowledge that Shikishima was chosen as a kamikaze pilot, and everybody knows that his mission had already passed, so everybody in the village immediately realizes what Shikishima had done in order to survive. More time is spent in the post-war aftermath. For instance, on Shikishima's first night home, he starts to starve and realizes it's been over 3 days since he last ate. He actually wants to die from starvation, but the hunger urges him to live for the very first time. Of course, the theme of living is incredibly central to Godzilla -1, and this is the first instance it's brought up in the novelization. Shikishima first meets Noriko in a black market. I didn't realize that's what that setting was in the movie. I always thought that was just a normal market in the remains of Shikishima's village, but it is confirmed to be a black market. The reason he's there is because it's the only place he can find affordable food, and all the food he's eating everything is leftover scraps from US soldiers. The book stresses that Shikishima is truly pure of heart with an innate desire to help others. It's actually the reason he blocks Noriko, because he's trying to help the authorities who are chasing her after she's stolen something. Shikishima notes that Noriko is the only person who actively tells him she wants him to live and doesn't ask for him to risk his life or to straight up die since the war started. That strengthens their bond so much. It's also confirmed here that the Shinseimaru's trips last for days at a time, with Shikishima being at sea for sometimes up to weeks. Shikishima's nightmare is extended in the novelization. When he walks out, he's no longer in his village. The remains of the Odo Island outpost burn around him, and the soldiers who died there line up. One of them asks why he's still alive, and then one of the men from Shikishima's suicide mission he dodged steps forward and answers, it's because he's a coward. Shikishima in the novelization is not only haunted by the mechanics of Odo Island, but also the entire squadron who died when he was supposed to go on his suicide mission. Shikishima is then so overwhelmed by the nightmare Godzilla, who, fun fact, appears on page 54 of the novelization. I thought that was fun. Shikishima is so overwhelmed by the nightmare Godzilla that he actually starts to believe that the dream itself is reality and it's just too much to comprehend. So as he starts to feel that the dream is the real world, he believes that the real world is some form of purgatory that he keeps escaping to in order to try and get out of the situation mentally. He thinks that in reality, he's just standing there waiting to die at Godzilla's foot. That kind of makes the scene where he wakes up and he doesn't know what's real and what's fake make a little bit more sense, if you didn't get it already. He's a poor, tormented little man. Shikishima feels that the photos of the mechanics are in some way alive, always looking at him and always silently asking, why are you still alive? As for the creation of Godzilla, they name drop Bikini Atoll Operation Crossroads Baker test, which is the one you see in the film, but they name drop the exact test so you know this is to blame for the creation of Godzilla. As the bomb goes off, a bunch of birds are vaporized by the nuke. The novelization also confirms that this is the same Godzilla from Odo Island sleeping nearby the nuke site, and that he actually spends most of his time at sea and doesn't always visit Odo Island. I know some people thought that it was a different Godzilla, but this is confirmation it's the same Godzilla. Poor Godzilla is blasted by the nuke, and we get an in-depth description of his transformation. First of all, Godzilla is burned to ashes. His skin was boiled, and his flesh was ripped away until there was little meat remaining. The novelization paints a much more graphic and far more sympathetic portrayal of Godzilla's transformation. Godzilla is confirmed to have a natural regeneration factor. It's the reason he's been able to stay alive this long. Because Godzilla's cells heal, he can also stay alive longer, as he's constantly regenerating. Godzilla's regeneration is hijacked by the radiation from the nuclear bomb. Trying to restore Godzilla to his original form, there's so little of him left that his regeneration factor overcompensates and starts to grow like a cancer, bubbling out of control. Godzilla's skin goes from a thick leathery flesh to a rock-like texture. His spines grow and branch off incredibly fast and painfully. Godzilla's skin keeps layering itself over and over again like an ancient oyster. Every time it thinks it's done, a new layer will grow, trying to repair the damage caused. Godzilla also recognizes that this is happening to him and realizes that at the end of the transformation, he is no longer the creature he was before the bomb went off. Most importantly, Godzilla recognizes and is furious at humanity for having done this to him, realizing instantly that the nuclear bomb is a human weapon. The novelization boldly states, and I thought it was so freaking cool to read, this was the moment Godzilla was born. The novelization now officially switches from calling Godzilla Gojira, pronounced like Gojira, but to officially calling him Gojira, Godzilla. This is the moment Godzilla was born, and with it his name changes and everything. It's so cool. I loved that. I loved the fact that the spelling transformed along with Godzilla. That was so awesome. What are your thoughts on all of that? I loved reading about the extended transformation for Godzilla. It actually goes by really fast when you read it in the novelization. It's like one page, but it was so interesting to read about how Godzilla felt and what happened to him during that process, and it makes you understand his rage a whole lot more. Do you have have the Godzilla -1 novelization. I got mine from Amazon, but do you have the novelization? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? If not, what are your thoughts on this video and what you've learned so far? I cannot wait to continue this with you guys. We'll go through Act 2 soon enough, and then we'll get into all the juiciness that happens on the rest of the novelization moving forward. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It's because of the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you in the first place. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man out.